Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk. Barebones stresses what MVPs actually are. Yeah. All right. So let's get into it. I'll start first with a quote. Everything I do references something that has influenced me. This was said by Virgil Abloh. So the entirety of my talk came to be as a result of a lesson I learned this year. I participated in a hackathon sometime this summer at Lagos in Nigeria, and it's essentially the AI hackathon. So I was able to assemble a very well put together team, and we ended up in top 10 of the hackathon. We didn't win, but a lot of lessons were learned. I am a I'm a product manager, so essentially, there are processes I tend to follow, and the hackathon was a learning exercise. It helped me challenge majority of the things I knew, and that's more or less the origins of my talk. So moving on, I would go on to introduce myself. My name is Godson Njoku. I often go by the alias Godspeed amongst my friends and people who know me. I am a product manager, also a co-organizer for GDG Enugu in Nigeria. I love the internet and the joy it brings to everyone in form of content, connections, and every other thing in between. I love docu-series, I love motorsport, and I'm on Formula One. You could find me on social media or online, generally at Sage Godspeed, Sage underscore Godspeed. I keep forgetting the underscore. All right, moving on. Yeah, so I'm just going to kick off my talk by explaining the core fundamentals, and this will more or less lay the necessary foundation needed for my talk. So I'll start with how products born. Products tend to stem out from ideas for a problem that an individual is facing, and they decide to go out to solve it after thinking clearly about it and coming up with a plan. And that's like the very first part of the chart on this side provided by product plan, which is developing the idea, going on to see if other people have the same problem with you, which validates it, and creating a solution which is in form of building out a prototype, which is more or less called product development. That's the start of it. Getting the right messaging, which is more or less framing your problem properly, building out the product, releasing the product to the public, and improving the product. So in the course of this talk, I will just more or less summarize it into product ideation, development, launch, and iteration. Yeah. So up next, we're going to talk about how complexity is the enemy of product development. So just like I early referenced, the hackathon I participated in, we ended up building a service that lets people register their IP, particularly in the media. And now, being a product person, I tend to think things thoroughly and fully. And we ended up with a very complex solution that we brought down, at least that's what we thought. We minimized it, and it still was complex because there were a lot of moving parts. And this just goes to tell you how the human brain is. We tend to complicate simple things. We start out with very simple problems, and all of a sudden, we are very much in the thick of it in terms of complexity. And it happened a lot in the product world or generally in business, and that's what's brought along the concept of MVPs. MVPs start out, or rather they stand for minimum viable product. It's the earliest version of every product, and the goal is to solve the problem with the essential, necessary, important solutions before going on to make it fancy and gaining feedback, improving it. And as you can rightly see, the diagram besides this definition shows it how chairs evolved from very simple designs all the way to something very complex and fancy. And that's how product iteration works. So you take feedback and you improve it, and you get to going, and that's it. So minimum viable products, the concept is started out through the lean startup methodology, which is more or less only doing the bare minimum you need and moving very fast. My slide will be shared, so you could go read up more about it. The URL is attached. Yeah. So we're going to talk about the key principles of MVPs. Now, there are basically three at this point. So simplicity, which is prioritizing very straightforward and simple UX to solve a user need at its very core. Feedback loop, making sure that your users can tell you how you solve their problem and ways to improve it. So that's more or less making it a loop. So it's a circle, it keeps going. And based on that feedback loop, you have the third principle, which is iterative development, which means that for every feedback you get, there's always chance for you to improve the product or the solution and get it better for the users, both those who are old and the new ones coming. So what does barebone chassis mean? For starters, it's not fancy. Barebones is more or less describing a system that has already been set to only have the most essential core components required for it to work while keeping costs very low. And a chassis is more or less the supporting frame of an object. The GIF on the right side of the screen is more or less showing you what the barebone chassis of the steering wheel for a Formula One car would be like, or it's like. It's no secret why it's there. I love Formula One. Yeah. So now bringing down the Barebones chassis concept to MVPs is more or less streamlining an MVP to its absolute core essential requirements or operational features and its safeguards and nothing else. So the goal of this is more or less that nowadays we live in a world where everything tends to be very fancy and giving luxury feeling, and things can get very very rapidly complicated as a result of that. So what I'm proposing with my talk is that you should whilst you are focusing on that, you should also make sure that you are having an ancillary mindset. Everything is minimalist but yet functional. Yep. So Barebones chances MVP. So I'll give you a few examples. So YouTube Music is a very great example of a barebone chassis. It was more or less stripped out of YouTube itself because a lot of users used YouTube Music as a way to find great music sources. And yeah, so over time the product has rapidly evolved and there are many more things in it now. If you are concerned with the piggy bank product, it started off with just being all about savings, and now it's added more and it's rebranded to become PiggyVest. You could go explore it on Google Play Store or Apple. There is also Abeg, which is now Pocket App. It started up as social um, cash transfers, and it's now way more than it is. Please be advised, this is not an ad. I'm just giving clear examples. Yeah. Uh, so up next now we'll be talking about what a barebone chassis MVP will look like. That's a mouthful. I agree. But in order for you to understand this is the ability of the human mind to overcomplicate things, especially solutions to simple problems, would make you understand that many MVPs or many products out there that are touted as MVPs aren't particularly MVPs. So the barebone chassis concept I'm advocating for is all about making sure that you build out your first version. Now this applies to your first version of a product or a feature, that it's only its absolute bare needs or core features, and you're able to build it in timelines that are regarded as hackathon style development. This doesn't mean you won't follow the step process if your team is all about that, but yeah, it's all about this. So I'm just going to give you very quick difference check between two MVPs because they are both MVPs and they are for an apparel brand. Yeah. And if you don't know what an apparel brand is, a very very good example is the Off-White from Virgil Abloh. Yeah. And so both products here listed out are with their features, and they can be both considered MVPs, but one is barebone chassis and the other one is just a regular MVP, or can be considered a regular MVP. And you can see the features for one has 8 features and the other has 3, and they are both all about selling, e-commerce particularly. And you can see that both features are important. Yes, the features in both apps are very important, but one has the promise of getting out there very fast for users to begin buying products and generating revenue for the apparel brand, while the others might take a longer time, have more exciting bells and whistles. But remember, we're in the business of quickly turning around things and driving value. So you could see here, user auth, catalog, recommendations, search, AR test boots, and the good stuff. When the barebone chassis, we just had simple categories in the catalog, a cart and checkout, tracking for people to make sure that stuff that they bought is getting to them. Yeah, and that's more or less what a barebone chassis will look like. And if you think very clearly, if you're a builder or a product design person or a product person generally, you'll be able to at least accurately estimate, or give an estimate rather, of what will get to the market first. Yeah. So I'm gradually coming to the end of my talk. So I'll end it up with an quote. So ship usable products first always. It's better for your team morale, it's better for your stakeholders, your investors, and everyone in general, the users particularly. There's a quote here from Jason Fried. You could take time to find out about him. He does exciting things in products. He said the sketch is always the best version, then everything goes downhill from there. And it's very important to at least think about that. All right, so we're going to now. I have laid the groundwork for what it means for a product or an MVP to be Barebones chassis. We're going to talk about how to get your MVP for your next product or your next project or side portfolio project out there. So, making your product Barebones MVP chassis involves careful planning. So you need to be very careful at which how you pursue making your product a Barebones MVP, and requires speed and precision and being result oriented. Do not start out a product without a goal or result in mind. It's just going to lead to wasteful use of resources. So first things first, you need to decide the single core problem you want to solve. In the case of the apparel brand, they wish for their customers to come online and buy their product. And you now have to decide how you want to solve it. This involves the channels, the kind of platform you wish to use to solve your product, and every other thing in between. And you also need to decide a build timeline. You have to decide how long it will take to build out this particular solution to your problem, the problem you face or your users face. And you're going to go on to craft just a single user story around that single core problem you fought for. And you will allocate a resource budget for it. You'll come up with every other single documentation you need. My advice to you is to keep it simple, Superman or superhuman rather. And when you're done with all of that, you need to find out where those your prospective users will be. Where are they? What channel do you use to get across to them, and plan for that. It's very important. Then the fifth step here is to choose a progressive design system and make it canon. Because it's a sketch doesn't mean that it shouldn't look nice. Remember, there's a phrase in my language, Igbo, and it says it's the eyes that buys first, roughly translated to English. So you need to pick out a design system and stick with it. That way, when your product gets to evolve, things are not haphazard, everything is put together and it's fine. So moving on will be, now the first part of these steps are more or less groundwork involving a lot of documentation. And to be very honest, documentation saves lives. Planning saves lives in product development. I can't tell you how much that's very important. Yeah. So now we're going to the proactive stage, which is the build part. So now we are basically in the sixth step. We're going to build out the solution to that problem with the absolute bare bones minimum and low effort. So this involves you not reinventing the wheel, utilizing services that are available to you, whether free or paid if you can afford for that, and making sure that that goes into your product. So a lot of these decisions here in number 6 has been derived from your documentation and research phase. Yeah. So item 7 is ensure that you have your necessary safeguards built in. Minimization for data, privacy, security, all of those things. It's important you do those things because as much as your MVP is out there, a prototype or a test or a sketch, you do not want your users to suffer consequences of not having those safeguards built. If you recall in the previous slide, I had a car that was Barebones chassis. Even there and there within, the car still has a seat with a functional seat belt, fire suppression systems, and every other thing involved. Whenever they go on to apply the panels and make it a beautiful looking car, it will all still be fine. So those who are going to test out the car are still going to be fine. Then the next part is to decide what your feedback channels will be. It has to be very low effort for your user. Remember, we talked about finding out the channels for your users, where they are. And when you are doing that, you decide your feedback channel. Now you have to make it that your users can easily give you feedback without having to be stressed, because um, the thought of feedback takes a lot of mental strain. So you also want to make that very easy for your customers. Item 9 on my list here is product launch. Once you have done the building, the safeguards, and every other form of documentation, feedback channel, you need to get your product out there. A product is not considered successful until it is in the hand of a paying customer or a customer itself. Once it's out there, you have to now go on to the final step, which makes it a valid MVP, which is to learn and iterate with customer feedback or user feedback. It is very important that you iterate and learn. So with that, I come to the end of my talk. Thank you very much. Big shout out to everyone who helped with my talks, reviews, video, every single thing. You could find my slides on the URL on the screen, which is http://barcha. Do have a lovely day. Thank you.